Hey there, Jim. How are you doing? Actually, let me turn on my speaker because I don't hear everything.
Hey there, Jim.
But I hear that.
How are you doing? Actually, let me turn on my.
Hearing my other feedback here. Let me see. Not catching your vocals right now. Hold on. Let's just check that. No, my speaker's up. I think I see you as muted. Let's see. Unmute mic. Oh, it says your mic is not connected. Let me just send you that. Just giving him a few minutes so Jim can go ahead and get his audio connected, and we'll get ready to start in just a few minutes. Making sure my thing is down. Okay, I think we have Jim there. Okay, how about that now? Jim can test your mic. Nope, still not hearing you. Let's see. It says your mic is not connected. Can you hear me okay? You hear me? And I'm just seeing a mute on yours. It's saying your mic is not connected when I look here. How strange. Let's see. What can we do? Always with live stuff, you get to run into these wonderful technical issues on here. It's just saying mic muted, not able to. Your guest has the mic disconnected. Let's see. See if we can get that audio resolved. And I hear me coming over. I'm just going to double check and see if I don't hear you coming over on the live stream. Can you give me a test on your mic, Jim? Yeah, it's not going over on the stream. So why is yours on your settings in your StreamYard? Do you have that mic selected in audio? You go to your audio settings. Is your mic set up to the right mic? See if we can get that on there. And while we wait for that going on, just reminder that if you look in your FinerWorks email newsletter, we did send out yesterday the holiday deadlines to when you need to get your orders in to absolutely make it there by Christmas. And what do you call it? Those are for our production times and what we're being told by our carriers so that those will get out on time. But like you said, once we run those over to the carriers, we do not have a lot of control on how things go. You probably want to even look at 2 weeks before that if you are looking international, if not 4 weeks, just with the way international transit is right now for packages. So take a look at your FinerWorks newsletter. We'll also have those up on our site. I'll be posting those in our social probably tomorrow. So you'll have them on there and you can bookmark them as well on there. What else do I have as far as announcements? Let's see. We're going to be ending just a little early today, about 5:15 or so. On Jim's presentation, as he has to make it out to an event at 6, and so do I as well. But what do you call it? The speed demons here will make our time. And also, if you did not get a chance to participate on Tuesday's FinerWorks discussion chat, which was basically a brainstorm of print products you could do, and it was wonderful because you were able to kind of really brainstorm on just ways to diversify your art. So if you go to our YouTube channel and you go to our First Tuesday playlist or the last video before this one, you'll be able to hit the replay on that. And That one I didn't break up into time codes for you to jump around on just because it is a brainstorm, literally. We had in attendance our co-founder, James Theopistos. We had our Clampett paper rep, Lewis, who was there to tell us about their experience at the Print United Expo in Las Vegas last month, and a lot of new products that they saw that we're hoping to have on here too. So let me see if we can add Junior.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Yay! I have no idea what the problem was, but you know how there's that old rule: if you can't figure out what the problem is, turn it off and turn it back on, and it'll probably be just fine.
Yep.
I just restarted my browser. I didn't do anything different.
Yeah, I've been having some funny little hiccups with browsers lately. I don't know. There's
Yeah.
something going on, I think, in the internet world. But yeah, I was just telling people, I know you were also in on our um, live for, first Tuesday and caught some of those
That's right.
products. I mean,
So many different things to choose from.
yeah, when I did my geo galleries thing on Wednesday, I have a live. It feels like almost every day too on the first week of the month. But we were talking on to photographers and ways to diversify their photography, because I do get a lot of portrait photographers that join geo galleries that want to sell their photographs, and they're like, well, I do portraits. How do I go in and start making anything kind of what people would want to buy it besides the family? And some of those are model releases, and maybe even using digital art to alter your photo to make an art piece, and even sometimes marrying that with typography, inspirational photography and stuff that kind of goes there with some, great words that just kind of marry very well to the image and the art. So those are some things we talked about. And then you have these products that we're talking about, t-shirts and magnets and other stuff to come out with FinerWorks, and especially the custom cutting contour things. I know if you go to maybe like Walgreens or Walmart, you'll see the small pictures of the kids with, like, for baseball. And they have them contoured cut to be a little standout.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's just lots
Yeah.
of ways to diversify your photography to kind of make these fun gift ideas for people. Because, I mean, yeah, like I said, we still like to give out. Yes, I think I heard a joke on the radio that says, why do we buy wallet pictures anymore? How do you stick them to your phone? And and that's like, well, that's why you might have to start diversifying the photography, smaller images to make them little art pieces that people want to have out still. So that was something that we kind of talked
That's
about.
all good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it was it was fun.
And those who are your fans will enjoy those kinds of things. They may not be able to spend the big bucks with you all the time, but those are usually lower priced items.
Yep.
At least for me, they are.
Yeah, so it's something kind of fun
Mm-hmm.
to offer, different photography things. But let's see what else. Okay, so we're going to be ending a little early today. Talked about our holiday deadlines are out now in the newsletter, and we'll go ahead just because we're going to go with a shorter time today. And we're going to talk about lenses. I think I went and looked at Digital Camera World magazine. Just did an article a couple of like this past month, and it was basically the top selling lenses for
Oh,
2022.
good.
So of course, I know you're probably going to tell us, the lens depends on what you're shooting. So with that in mind,
Yeah.
well, maybe you can tell us too with some brands, because I know it's going to get close to Christmas and we're going to start seeing those deals and discounts. And I think people, when they start photography, that's probably, like you said, one of the first questions they ask is, what
Mm-hmm.
lenses do I buy? Because it is an investment. That's
Yeah.
um, and it will depend on what you want to do. But there are brands like Canon and Sigma that have been around a long time. So I think Canon was probably at the top of that list almost for every different lens, from telephoto lens to zoom lenses to everything I saw on there, it was Canon, and then we started bringing into some other brands in there. So I'm gonna go ahead. I have your I'm gonna put it one more time too, just in case. There is the link to the presentation, and I will let me move this way so that way, if you want to share your presentation up there, we can have it, and we'll let you start on lenses today, Jim, because you are just a plethora of information. You are our photo guru.
I know a couple of things, but there's a ton to know. There's so much to know about I mean, photography is endless. You could study photography for your entire career, 8 hours a day, and never learn all there is to know about photography. Even when you break it down into just the different parts, lenses alone, there is just so much there to learn that you're never going to know all of it. But if we understand the gist of it, if we understand the base, the reason why things are the way they are, then we're very well prepared to be able to make decisions on what the next thing is to purchase based on our goals, what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, it's kind of like going in, you hear me, if anyone has heard me before, I use this analogy constantly. It's like going into a tool store. Every single one of those tools is a good tool, every one of them. But they're not all the right tool for what you're trying to do right now. So therefore, just because something's good does not mean it's good for you currently. So all of them are good. Yeah, every single one of them. But which ones are the right ones for you? Takes a little bit of knowledge to know that. And you can't just ask someone saying, hey, I'm going to go to Home Depot, I'm going to go to Lowe's or whatever your favorite tool store is, and I'm going to buy a good tool. Can you give me an idea of what a good tool is? What tool I should buy? What's the best deal? What's going to last a while? Anyone you ask that question is going to have to go one step further and say, well, what is it that you're trying to do? Yet too many people giving advice on photography don't know it themselves. They start giving advice without knowing what it is that you're going to be doing with it. And that's just as unintelligent as giving someone an answer to what tool should I buy at a tool store. Oh man, I love the hammer. You should go buy a hammer. Well, okay, that may be perfect for what you're trying to do. But you don't know what they're trying to do. So you're not giving the right advice unless you happen to get lucky, which why would you be doing that? Find out what it is someone wants to do before you start answering any questions. And by the way, if you don't know the answers to those questions, that's fine. Maybe you know some resources to tell them about. And there's tons of resources. I mean, just going to Google and entering a couple of questions, you're going to find some answers. Now, you may not know what questions to ask. I understand. If you're starting something out totally new, you really don't know what the correct questions are to ask. And that's a downfall of YouTube, but that's its only downfall. It's fantastic other than that. If you know the questions to ask, YouTube's fantastic. But if you don't know the questions, that's where it's not its strong suit. It's not a strong suit also when it comes to structure. When you do learn one thing after the other, kind of like building a home, if you were to learn photography like you should, you'd start off with the foundation, and then you'd move to the walls, you'd move to plumbing, electricity. You would do it in a very purposeful step-by-step method. But most of us do not learn photography that way. We learn photography kind of like if it was a house, we'd be learning photography by what are our countertops going to be? What color are we going to paint the walls? What are we going to put ceiling fans? Are we going to put chandeliers? We're starting off with the pretty stuff when we learn photography. And that's not the best way to learn. It's okay, but it causes a lot of gaps in education, and you're totally unaware of the gaps. You're just not aware until something comes along and you have this epiphany. Like, oh wow, well if there was a structure to the way you learn, then those epiphanies are much fewer and farther between because there's not as many gaps in the education. So there's a little bit of base. Let's move into into lenses a little bit more. And before I do, my name is Jim Landers. and I am the owner of Landers Photography School in San Antonio, Texas. We have been in business since 1997, and we have made some changes because COVID decided that we needed to make some changes. I'm sure your business felt the same way. We had a brick and mortar store up until a school up until 2020. So 2 years ago, and we have now moved everything online. We do some classes in person here in San Antonio sometimes, but the majority of what we do is now done online, and we do mostly business classes now. We still have a lot of photography classes that we do, but it is mostly on the business side to help someone earn a living doing it, what it is that they're passionate about, especially on the portrait side. That's my specialty, is the portrait side, and so that's where I help people. What do you think about all that, Melissa?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting though how you've done some of the in-person stuff with these lunches that you do with some of the area photographers, because I see on your Facebook and you'll post from after lunch and y'all everybody's got big smiles and you just see the enrichment in the faces. You know what I mean? Like you feel like you've like discovered some hidden gem in knowledge, and you see that with the people that you have luncheon, and we're hoping to kind of bring that in January with
Cool.
your things and kind of have a little of that going on in here and have a panel discussion like that. So
I
that's going to
like
be
that.
fun. That's going to be a lot of fun.
I like that. So, thank you for putting the website
Yeah.
address up there. I appreciate that. If you're wondering why I am, wearing a white shirt, and you can probably see the little tags on there. I'll bring this a little bit closer. I've got one here. So let's see if I can get that to focus. Maybe not. Let's put something behind it.
We can, yeah, a little bit right there. Yeah, I see the star in there.
There we go.
Yeah. Oh,
Texas.
Texas. There you
So
go.
those are my what are these called? I forgot.
Like,
Studs. Those are my studs, and my cufflinks are the same, but they are just a slight bit different. There we go. So I'm going to a charity, a fundraising event here in just a little while
mhm.
at the Southwest School of Art.
Oh,
It's their
great
annual
organization, great place to
gala.
be at. Yeah. And so you're going to be shooting that event, or are you going to be attending as a guest, or
I'm photographing it.
you're
I'm getting
photographing?
paid to be there.
Yeah, that's always the awesome aspect. And again,
Hmm.
I bet you have how many lenses do you use for a live event like that that you're going to be shooting?
I definitely try to keep things as simple as possible. I will bring two,
Hmm.
and I'm likely to use the same one the entire evening. Uh, well, this particular one, I'm close to everybody, so a
Hmm.
telephoto lens is not of any benefit at all.
Hmm.
And so I'll be using a 24 to 70 2.8 lens. And for the most part, that does a good job. There's a handful of times where I do wish I would have had a wider lens at events, but for this one, I'll be fine.
Yeah. Is that pretty much the same thing for any kind of events like weddings, or do you feel like with those kind of events you really have to stack up on lenses, or do you, like you said, keep it simple?
I I almost always am keeping it simple. I know ahead of time what it is that I'm trying to accomplish, and I just bring the tools that are needed for that, with a backup, of course. But so I'm just whatever it is. Now, if I haven't done what I'm doing before, I might go scout it ahead of time.
Hmm.
I may do some research on what I feel I'm going to need. But the majority of the things that I need are defined in that planning session that you do with the person you're going to be working with, or the contact person, and you find out what they are wanting to do, what their end result is supposed to be. This isn't when you're photographing an event. This is their stuff. It's
Hmm.
collaborative. It's you may not even put it in the art category, but it is a collaborative work where you find out what it is that they want, and you help them to get that, based on the tools and the knowledge that you have. And of course, the more tools and more knowledge, the more you're able to do.
Hmm.
But for a lot of events, things are pretty simple, and a 24 to 70 is oftentimes the workhorse lens for event work.
Oh, that's good to know, because I think a lot of people, or like I said, you're looking for what you're going to start with, and something that is a good tool for a couple of different scenarios and event situations. Good, because those event gigs are a bread and butter, and that's what
For
I say.
some people, that is, yeah.
It's bread and butter. And then I know people who do that as, this is my bread and butter, shooting weddings, but I like shooting wolves in Alaska during, November, December. And that's like, that's their trip, and they go do that as their art,
Yeah.
So that's good to know.
Yep. So let's get into some of these basics. So, because these are the things that help you really understand. And so I'm going to, let's see, how do I share
Present.
this? Present, yes. Share my screen. Window.
And I will put it here.
There it is.
Let me add that to the screen there, and let me see if I can give us a bigger view there. There we go. Let me see if there's a way to, why don't we do that right there for right now? And then trying to see which would be the best in there.
I can move this over a little bit. How's that?
Okay, yeah, I think if we do that and use this as your, and if you're watching right there, just give us in the comments if that looks good to you, and let us know where you're watching from. And I think that looks okay.
So, by the way, there's several of my seminars that have this pirate guy on there. Several years ago, when I first started writing them, I made all of them the pirate guy, and over time I've changed out many of them. But some of them I just left it because I like this pirate guy. It was a fun session. It was done. You probably can picture this. This was done in the studio, and this was there's no background added. That was the background. We had a painted background that I lit to look this way. So that is a photograph straight from the camera. Now, it has had some enhancements. I've worked on his face a little bit and brought out his eye just a little bit.
Yeah.
But that image was done in my studio that I had for many years, but not anymore.
Yeah.
So, but that's where that comes from. He's an actor. I don't know that he still does, but he was an actor then. So, let's go over a few definitions, just so we can lay some groundwork to make sure we're all on the same page. And I'm going to be silly with one of them, but it's all good. Camera. All right. The most basic definition of a camera that you can think of. Now, I probably should cover that up, but it's sitting there on your screen right now. But in my classes, I like to give people an opportunity to just answer that question with what is in their mind. Because most people, when they're asked to define what a camera is, its most basic definition, most people will give a definition that includes technology that's been added to it over the years. So something that collects, that makes a photograph. Well, a camera is a tool to do that, but the camera at its most basic form doesn't collect anything. It's just a light, tight box with a hole. That's all a camera is. And for those of you who have taken certain art classes and certain photography classes, you may have created a pinhole camera, which is a light, tight box with a hole. And you cause it to be able to create or to collect light by putting some kind of photosensitive material in it. But it was the photosensitive material that collected the light. It wasn't the camera. So inside our cameras now, the DSLRs, the mirrorless, there's an image sensor in there that's collecting the light. So it is the image sensor that collects the light. So that's what a camera is at its most basic definition, a light, tight box with a hole. Now, what's a lens? Well, it's that little thingy in front of the body of the camera that focuses and refracts light. A couple other definitions I want to talk about is one is focal length, and I'm going to go into more detail in that one here in just a bit. That's what that little asterisk is telling us. It's the distance between the focal plane sometimes called an imaging plane. That's where the digital image sensor is, or film if you're using film, and the optical center of the lens. So the distance between the focal plane and the optical center of the lens. This is the point where light crosses. And I'm going to show you an illustration of that here in just a second. Let me finish the definitions first, though. So focal plane, imaging plane. This is the image sensor or the film. Optical center, the spot where all the light converges on a lens. And I'm going to show you that illustration real quickly. So if you're curious about what the pieces of glass might look like inside your camera, that's what you're seeing on your screen right here in the bottom right. Biconvex, plano-convex, there's several different types, but that's basically what they look like. This is just for curiosity purposes. I'm not going to spend any time with that. I'm not going to be talking about grounding glass and polishing glass or what glass is made of. No, we're not going into those kind of technical details. We'll go into a few, though, technical details. One is this here that on the screen that I have now, the focal length. This is the defining characteristic of any lens, is its focal length. The distance between the optical center, the point at which the light is concentrated at the center of the lens, and the focal plane where the light ends, the digital image sensor or film. And so you can see this illustration, and the reason I gave you the definition of a camera earlier is so that this image makes sense to you. So this box, light-tight box, hole to let light in, so that represents your camera. This triangle, the red triangle, just represents the subject that you're photographing. The lines that come off of it just represent those 2 points on the subject. And you'll notice that it crosses at the optical center. If it doesn't cross, it'd be like you holding a magnifying glass and burning a hole or starting a fire on some leaves, because you're concentrating the light at that one point. It's not creating an image, it's concentrating light. So this is where it just crosses. It has to cross and end somewhere in order for you to be able to collect the image. So the distance between optical center and the imaging plane or focal plane is focal length. That's what's going on in your camera. So you might be wondering, where exactly is the optical center? A lot of people believe that it is the back part of your lens, and it could very well be, but it is not limited to that. It is just simply the point where the light crosses. And it's going to be somewhere between the final lens in the final piece of glass in your lens and slightly in front of that. It's going to be somewhere in there. But that distance is focal length. Now, why is that important? Because on your camera, on your lens, you see something called millimeters. The distance between optical center and imaging plane is measured in millimeters. That's where those numbers on your lens come from. So when you see a 50 millimeter lens, it is 50 millimeters. The distance between the optical center and the imaging plane is 50 millimeters. That is what makes it a 50 millimeter lens. That's why those numbers are important. Now, do you have to know those numbers in order to use a lens? No. You should know them in order to know what the correct tool is, though. But let's just say you've never done photography in your life, and someone hands you a camera, and it's got a 18 to 55 millimeter lens on it. That lens you're going to be able to use, to turn it to get it to zoom. Mm-hmm. The numbers on there just don't matter to you. But they are important when deciding what lens to buy. All right, let's talk about a little bit more about that. So this characteristic is broken down into 3 broad categories. The focal length listed below are for many DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, but pay more attention to the gist than these numbers. All right, so for a regular 35 millimeter digital camera, these numbers are absolutely correct, but it does change with the camera. All right, let's just talk about the gist of it. Normal lens. Normal is interesting because it's one of the few things, a standard or a normal in photography, that exist. There aren't a whole lot of them, because all of the tools available in photography are just to help you get the end result that you want. It'd be like saying the standard tool at Home Depot or Lowe's is. There is no standard tool at Home Depot or Lowe's. There's a whole bunch of tools there. So the standard, that's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. The normal tool that people buy, no, it doesn't. That's not how it works. These are just tools to help you get the end result. But in this instance, we have a normal, and the reason why we have a normal is because this is based off of something that's not camera related. It's based off of your own eyes. You have a field of view, and it's larger than just this space in front of you because you've got peripheral vision. Some of you have fantastic peripheral vision. I used to joke with my students in the classroom. I don't know how, it'd probably be too difficult to do it on a Zoom call, but I would say I've got fantastic peripheral vision. I can tell you how many numbers I'm holding up. Now, over here, you can see it's real easy. I've got 2, and now I've got 4, and now I've got 5, and now I've got 1. I can see all the way back here. By the way, everyone laughed at that except for this one guy who looked behind and he said, "You can see the reflection in that photograph, the glass that was in the photo. You can see the reflection of that in there." And as soon as he said that, he just went, because he realized what was actually going on there. It was a little bit embarrassing for him, I think, because the rest of the class, there's about 8 in the class, and so 7 people are thinking this is pretty funny. At his expense, of course. Okay, so the point is, you can't read anything in your peripheral vision. You can notice things, especially motion or certain colors, flash, which is motion. And so if there is some motion out here, it causes you to be able to turn and see what it is. So if there was text that you were going to be reading, you can't read text in your peripheral vision. You can't. You may be able to tell that's what it is, but you can't read it. It must be in your normal field of view, not including the peripheral, which for us is the equivalent of 50 millimeters for a 35 millimeter camera. So 50 millimeters, the space right here, the area that you have the ability to read in and see most clearly and be able to clarify and understand the environment around you. That is what normal is. So normal for most cameras is a 50 millimeter lens, meaning that a wide angle is anything smaller than 50 millimeters. So let's say it's a 35 millimeter, a 24 millimeter, an 18 millimeter. That is called a wide angle lens. Opposite, anything greater than the 50 millimeters. A 70 millimeter lens, an 85 millimeter lens, a 100 millimeter lens, a 200, a 300, whatever it is, if it's greater than 50, it is a telephoto. Now, I'm going to talk about zoom lenses here in just a little bit, but I have come across a lot of people who believe that telephoto and zoom is the same thing. It is absolutely not. You have a misunderstanding if you believe that it is. That doesn't make you a bad person. That just means that you can learn something right now. So telephoto is just meaning any number greater than 50 for that type of camera. By the way, there's medium format cameras and there's large format cameras, and those numbers do change as a result. But let's keep it simple. From your normal lens, anything that's a larger number than that is a telephoto. Anything smaller is a wide. And I'm going to come back to zoom lenses here in just a little bit. Additional types of lenses you may come across are macro lenses, where you're trying to get something with a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning you photograph a dime and it's the exact same size on your image sensor. 1-to-1. By the way, I've come across some macro lenses that are 2-to-1. It's not really a macro, but okay. It's in that direction. Advantage of a macro lens is also that you can get so much closer. Every lens has a closest focusing distance. Macro lenses get like almost on, I mean, they're almost on top of your subject. But if you need to get even closer, then a micro lens is what you need. You've heard of a microscope. So you already know this lens, even though you may not be thinking about it much. A microscope gets so super close to the subject, it's ridiculous. It looks like it's touching. And then you have tilt shift lenses. Tilt shift is a really cool lens. The name brand tilt shift lenses are going to be over $2,000, but you can get them with the off-brand lenses for less. But they change the focusing plane. So instead of it being parallel to where you're at, you can put it at an angle. You can put it at a tilt, a shift. You can do pretty much whatever you want with it. Meaning that if I'm at an angle to a wall and I have a shallow depth of focus, then I get one sliver of the wall that's in focus. But if I want the entire wall in focus, and I don't want to change my angle, a tilt shift lens causes me to get that entire wall in focus, even with the same exact aperture. So that's fantastic. It's one of those lenses you're not going to see very often. How about a reflex lens? Have you heard of a reflex lens? You'll usually see them in about a 500 millimeter, and they do have certain limitations, and they look odd. For instance, most of them are f8, period. You do not get a range of apertures, of f-stops. F-stop is just a unit of measurement to measure the hole that's coming into the light that's coming into the camera. So the f8 is the only f-stop available on these reflex lenses. And as far as what do they look like, they're generally shorter than some other equivalent lenses. And the reason is because there is a mirror. That's where the word reflex comes in. There's a mirror, and there's two mirrors inside of them, actually. There's one that you can see the backside of, and it sits right in the center of the lens, making you think there's going to be a dark spot in all your photographs. And then you create a photograph and you realize there's no dark spot. Why is that? Because it's so close, it's out of focus. That's why. And there's more to it than that, but you're not going to see it at all, not even slightly, except when you have a shallow depth of focus and highlights in your scene. For instance, let's picture Christmas lights, or maybe you're at the beach and you're looking out onto the water, and the light is reflecting off it. Maybe it's in the morning or in the evening, and the light's reflecting off the surface of the water. And so you have all these little spots of highlights sparkling on the surface of the water. With those, if they are out of focus, they are going to look like donuts instead of what a lot of us call bokeh or bokeh. So those circles they're called circles of confusion, but I think most people don't even realize they're called that and just call it bokeh or bokeh. But they turn, the bokeh is simply the shape of the light coming through the lens. That's it. It's the shape of the light coming through the lens. And so because the shape of the light with the mirror in the middle of the lens looks like a donut, that is what the bokeh looks like. And if you put a piece of paper in front of your lens with a Christmas tree cutout, well, then your bokeh will look like Christmas trees. All right, that was a little aside, but still fun. What other lenses can you guys think of? There's a popular one that every time I've had a class, everyone has come up with this other one. Fisheye. That's right. One of those lenses that most of us don't ever buy, but you can rent them, and they're around $1,000 usually. You can probably get them cheaper, but they're mostly a toy lens, and so I do feel like renting is the best way to go with those kind of lenses. But if you've got the extra money, go for it. I know at least one wedding photographer who always had his fisheye with him and would create a handful, not very many, images with his fisheye, just so he could create some really different images that no one is going to have. Because How many people have fisheye lenses, especially at an event like a wedding? So he would create one at most of the weddings. So there you go. And there's other types, lots of other types of lenses. Now, let's talk about the side effects, because every single tool in photography has both an effect and a side effect. Every tool. So you can already picture what the effect of these different lenses are, because if you've got a wide angle lens, you get a wider version of the scene. If you're using a telephoto lens, you're getting a cropped in version of the scene. You're not getting this other stuff out there. And depending on to what degree, it's, a really, really tight crop of the scene. The side effects are kind of interesting, especially on the telephoto, which I'm going to get to in a second. Let's start with wide. Wide angle lenses is expansion of space. Things do appear potentially to look further apart, especially the wider angle of the lens, the smaller number millimeters. At the edges, the subjects could become wider. Now, why is that important? All right, let's say that you're photographing your family get-together for Thanksgiving, and you're on steps. Let's say they're wide steps, not steps like that are to the second floor inside your home, but let's say some wider steps. Something that I recommend to photographers is those who are concerned about their weight. Had to be, politically correct with my terminology there. Those who are concerned about their weight, don't put them on the edges if you're using a wide-angle lens, because you have the potential to widen them further. So unless you just don't like them, don't do that. And if you don't like them, I mean, come on, have a heart. Don't do that. And while we're on the subject of groups, I have a couple other suggestions for you, not lens related, but still, since we're in that frame of mind, let's say we have a group, we're using 3 steps. Focus on the front row, not the middle row. Focus on the front row and use your f-stops, your aperture, to increase the depth of focus to include the other rows. So what does that mean? That means if you're photographing one row, you may not need a larger numbered f-stop. But as you get to more, to 2, to 3, and so on, you need a larger numbered f-stop to accommodate that increased depth of focus that you're going to need. By the way, it's called depth of field, but depth of focus, I think, makes sense on the surface. So when you have an increased amount of depth that you want in focus, increase your f-stop number to make sure that you include them, and make sure you focus on the first row. And one more thing about groups before I stop on groups. Those who are vertically challenged need to be in the front row. You've probably been in elementary school classroom groups where they line people up tallest to shortest. Mm-hmm. And you may think that when you're in your own family grouping that that's not important anymore. It still is.
I think I've been in the front row my whole life.
Well, so you have some tall siblings or tall relatives or tall friends?
They're probably average and I'm just short.
And the reason is because we want to see their face. Mm-hmm. And I guess there is one more piece of advice when photographing groups. Make sure to give them good advice when they're standing up there. I've heard photographers give advice that sounds good, and I'm going to tell you that one first because I want you to be able to compare and contrast this. I've heard people say, if you can't see me, I can't see you. And that sounds like good advice. That's probably the worst advice a photographer can give. The reason is because if someone's standing directly in front of me, I can still see the photographer. Better advice. Stand in between the 2 people in front of you. That way your head is in between theirs. How's that? Mm-hmm. All right. The side effect of a telephoto. Oh, this one is so much fun. Telephoto lens. It compresses space. When you create a photograph, you're taking 3-dimensional world and turning it into 2-dimensional. So therefore, If you're using a telephoto lens, you're cropping out all this other stuff, and you're just getting this long depth of space. And let's picture an environment where there is a lot of space. So therefore, you're compacting that scene into 2 dimensions, making things appear closer. You can see it on your screen right now. Subjects may appear closer to each other. Things far look like they are closer to the things that are close. Meaning, you could actually tell a lie with a lens very easily. I'm going to give you an example. So, several years ago, I was multitasking, which I'm not a multitasker. I mean, if I've got something like I'm in partial done and I can't get completed, I move on to the next thing. That's, I guess, if that's multitasking. But actually doing 2 things at the same exact time, not so good. But I'm sitting in front of the TV with my iPad going through my email, and I'm deleting things. I don't know about you, but I'm deleting a ton of stuff. I'm looking at each one, but I'm deleting a bunch of them. And so I'm just deleting stuff, and I hear Steve Spriester on Channel 12 here in San Antonio, WOAI. He says something that caught my attention and caused me to look up. He said, people are taking to the streets. And so I look up, and I'm thinking, what are they taking to the streets for? Right? I may not have that inner voice, but I think it's fun to say that. So I'm curious, what are they taking to the streets for? And so I see this scene of this, these 2 people with this banner, holding this long banner, and there's people behind them who are holding signs, and they are definitely in the streets. And it really looks like there's a lot of people there. But I noticed something about this scene. It's very obvious to me. And I understand it's not going to be obvious to everyone, but it's very obvious to me that it was created with a telephoto lens. First of all, it was in some foreign country. It probably would be something that the videographer would not want to get in the middle of. I don't know that it was violent. I don't know. But it looked to me like this videographer was a good distance, a really good distance, like totally not visible to the people who were out taking to the streets, that far away, long lens. And so I look at the scene, and there's some tells. And so that people look closer together than they actually are. And so I'm seeing these people, and I count the people who are actually part of the group. And I see that there's a lot of people who are there, but they're just wondering what's going on. They're not actually a part of it. It looks like they are. And if I didn't know about lenses, I would actually think that they were part of this group taking to the streets. But they were just curious what's going on here. And the thing that caused me to really know that for sure is because they showed 3 different scenes of these people who were taken to the streets. And the backgrounds of the people in the background of each one was different. I counted 8 people taken to the streets. It looked like there was 50 or I don't know, maybe 100 taken to the streets. And so that made news. Had the people who make the news learned a little bit about how lenses work, they would have realized that 8 people taken to the streets is really not national news. In fact, I think this was international news. I don't think they were lying. I really don't believe. I know some of you think that, news is biased, and news is, because it's run by humans, and humans are biased. There's no such thing as an unbiased human. So of course it is biased. But this has nothing to do with that. What I'm telling you now, we're not talking about that. We're talking about how a lens works. It did look like people, a lot more people, because it brought everybody together. It did. It's true. So let's say, let's say that my class in an alternate universe comes with a trip to Africa and a 600 millimeter lens. What do you think about that? That'd be a cool alternate universe, huh? If I catch that cheetah sitting on that hill way over there with my 600 millimeter lens, I'm able to zoom in on him and see him really well. And I've got my lens on a tripod. I can't handhold a lens that long. I can try, but it's not going to look good. And then I'm getting the sun going down behind him. And so I'm choosing to do a silhouette with one of my photographs. And so it's going to look like a cardboard cutout of the cheetah with this round disc, the sun, in red behind it. And the sun is going to look huge because the zoom lens is zooming everything in, not just your subject. It's not because the sun is bigger in Africa. It's because your zoom lens made it appear that way. So therefore, your lenses can actually change the story. Now let's give an example on the opposite end. Let's say it's a wide angle. Let's say that you are a photographer who is working with a news agency, and your editors told you to go and, I don't know, to let's say Central America and photograph someone who is clearly in a poverty. They're living on the street, or at least that's what it appears, because that's the story that they want to tell. All right, so you go and you get it situated in your hotel room, your nice, wonderful hotel room, knowing you're about to go out in an area that's not going to be as nice, and you are in there and you've got your stuff together, and you go to the balcony and you kind of look out, and a couple of streets over, you see exactly what you're there to get. And so you look over and you can see this woman who's sitting on the concrete sidewalk that's in serious disrepair, and the road's even worse. And behind it is what probably was some kind of a general store at one time, but now it's just peeling paint. Let's say it's green on cinder block, and a roof that's barely held together, a tin roof that's got some tires on top of it to keep it down. Definitely tells the story of someone who's living in a difficult situation. And so you think, man, I am going to be able to get this photograph without even leaving my room. And so you pull out your telephoto lens and you zoom in on her. But when you do that, you lose the story that I gave you. You lose the road that's in disrepair. You lose the majority of the building when you zoom in, because zooming in means cropping out. Zoom lenses are fantastic. Zoom lenses are fantastic. But they crop stuff out. And if you're trying to tell a story, you might not want a telephoto lens to tell it. It might crop too much of a story. Let's do the opposite. If you were to go down with your wide angle lens and photograph her sitting there, you can get her big in the frame while also getting the entire story in the background. Wide angle lenses win when it comes to storytelling. All right, I could keep on going on. Let's talk about the difference between zoom lens and prime lenses. So a fixed focal length lens is a prime lens. One focal length. You can't vary it. It comes with, it's just 50 millimeters. It's just 100 millimeters. It's just 500 millimeters. It does not zoom. That is a prime lens, or a fixed focal length lens. Not anywhere near as convenient as a variable focal length lens, but it has one really fantastic advantage. And actually, I could argue that there's two, but I'm going to give you the easy one. More light enters a fixed focal length lens than the same area, the same space of a variable focal length lens, a zoom lens. So there's a huge light advantage. If you're photographing in low light situations, a fixed focal length lens, generally speaking, has the advantage over zoom lenses. A variable focal length lens, which nobody calls it a variable focal length, but that's what it is, a zoom lens, has a range of focal lengths. And again, it has nothing to do with telephoto. You can have a telephoto zoom lens, but you can also have a wide angle zoom lens. If you've got that kit lens that came with some cameras, the 18 to 55, that is a wide angle zoom lens. Mm-hmm. It does not have telephoto on it. Now you may say, well, 55, that's greater than 50, so that's telephoto, right? Okay. We have a little bit of leeway when it comes to that. Somewhere between 50 and 55 is what normal is for a human. So it's really not. It is just to normal. Wide angle to normal. Therefore, a wide angle telephoto lens is what that would be. Now, Speaking of light that comes into a prime lens versus a zoom lens, you may have heard about using a fast lens. So what is it that makes a lens fast? Well, it's because it allows a lot of light in a short period of time. Now we've got shutter speed when I say short period of time. But the lower the f-stop number, the more light can enter the lens. Now you still have a range. So you can change it from f2 to f2.8 to f4 to f5.6 to f8 to f11 to f16. You can change it, and each time you go higher and higher numbers, it gets the hole that lets light in gets smaller and smaller, meaning less light's coming in, and that your depth of focus is increasing. But that's for another day. You can see the little image that I have sitting right next to it that says 1 colon. You see that on all lenses, 1 colon and then a number after it. And that is your f-stop. The 1 colon means the camera's maximum amount of light. Again, you can stop it down, but it's the lens's maximum amount of light. So this lens that's pictured is a 2.8. Meaning it can be 2.8. Now, a lot of lenses will say 2.8 dash something else or 3.5 dash 5.6. What that means is at different focal lengths, you get a different maximum. Now, let's talk about price here. When you get a lens that has a zoom lens that has a range on it, they cost less than the ones that just have a single number like mine, like the one here in the photograph that says 2.8. That is throughout. It doesn't matter what focal length I'm at. I can get 2.8 no matter what focal length I'm at. But with the cheaper, less expensive lenses, it changes. Just like my zoom changes, so does the f-stop range. But the price difference is pretty significant. Let's talk about the difference between a kit lens, like an 18 to 55, versus it's a 17 to 55. 2.8 lens. The difference in price is surprising. Now, it depends on the lens you buy. You can get lenses that are cheaper, but I'm going to make this easy. The lens, the 18 to 55 millimeter lens that is a kit lens, it's a 3.5-5.6, is going to be $200 or less. You'll be able to find it for under $200. In fact, you can buy it used for a whole lot less. So let's use that number 200. If you want to upgrade it, because you want that 2.8 throughout, which could be the right tool for you. And if you don't know whether it is or not, then it's not yet. Unless you've got, so much money that you don't know what to do with it. Okay, then that changes things. But most of us aren't in that position. Maybe Melissa is, but they're so the difference is, if you were to get that 2.8 lens, that 17 to 55, yeah, it's 1 millimeter more, but it's on the 17 versus 18. That's nothing. But the difference in price is add another zero.
Wow.
It's going to be up to $200. Yes, you can find it for less, but it's going to be up to and I've actually seen it for more at times. So $2,000. So a 10 times difference for just a little bit more light. But if it's the right tool for what you're trying to accomplish, then it's worth it, in my opinion.
Is it better to stick with the same brand lens to your camera body?
If I have to generally answer that question, I'm going to say yes. Mm-hmm. However, the advantage to the off brands is price, and they have gotten so much better than they used to be. Mm-hmm. For instance, in the 80s, Sigma just was junk. Sigma has become a really good off-brand lens nowadays. But something like Quantaray, I have a saying, stay away from Quantaray. And it hasn't gotten any better. But so I do recommend some off-brand lenses, and that's Sigma and Tamron, and occasionally there's some others, but I generally say tell people to stay away from things like Opteka. Stay away from it. It's junk. And chances are there's someone from Opteka and Quantaray watching right now, and they're probably really angry. Hey, I'm sorry, but I'm going to give my opinion. If you want to send me a lens to test it, and you're saying that it's gotten better, I'll test it. But my up to this date, I'm just thoroughly unimpressed, and that's saying it nicely.
And I believe that article that I was mentioning to you from Digital Camera World last month, those are basically the three that stayed on: Canon, Sigma, and Tamron were the ones on this top
Oh,
25
really? Cool.
lenses. So yeah, so that's pretty much the only brand I see there. So yeah, so I guess there's, like I said, you're the expert for a reason.
Well, so I use Nikon. I like all cameras, and my students have all different cameras. I'd
Mhm.
say probably number one is Canon. Uh, Sony is probably number two, but Nikon's really right there close, so they may be neck and neck.
Mhm.
So Canon, Sony, and Nikon, and then I have a handful of others. I see Fuji and Pentax and occasionally a Sigma camera, but not very often. So there are occasionally some others that I see. But yeah, I've used Nikon forever, and I don't see any reason to change. It's I don't know that I'm as much loyal as I am practical,
Mhm.
because I love Nikon, but I see no, even if I didn't, well, if I didn't, that would change things. But you in order to switch brands, you have to rebuy everything. So every single lens I've ever bought, potentially I'd have to buy it again, and I have no interest in doing that. But it's also mirrorless. The new lenses,
Mhm.
you're kind of having to buy them again, and that is causing some people to switch loyalties because they want to try a different brand. So, but these new mirrorless lenses are fantastic. I don't know if you guys, if any of you watching or Melissa have tried these. Wow,
Mhm.
the new, relatively new Nikon Z9, with all the lenses that are made for the Z series. Holy camole!
Yeah. Let
You're
us know
going to
in
be
the
thoroughly
comments if you have
impressed.
used the mirrorless lenses, for those of you watching. So just use the comment section and let us know what your experience has been on the mirrorless lenses if you've used them.
Hmm. Yeah,
We had that comment there from Lindsay who found this. She's finding this a little bit helpful there. So thanks, Lindsay, for letting us know.
cool. I appreciate that. And then let's talk about real quickly, focus,
Mhm.
and then I'm going to give you a homework assignment. So focus is based on distance and contrast. No contrast, no autofocus. Autofocus does not work without contrast. So if you're photographing a scene that's a solid color, your lens is going to go and not be able to focus. You've probably experienced that before. And pressing it harder doesn't work any more than pressing the elevator button several times causes the elevator go any faster. For subjects that are still, like portrait work that I do, photographing buildings, photographing trees, things that aren't moving, use a single point of focus as opposed to a multi-point or dynamic area mode. If you're photographing something that is moving or has the potential to move, then yeah, multi-point is going to be the better option. Now, there's continuous versus single shot autofocus. Continuous focusing is where it never stops focusing. It's constantly. So if you're photographing a sporting event, your subject is moving constantly. You want it on continuous focus. My subjects aren't moving. I'm photographing people. They aren't going anywhere when I'm photographing them because I don't photograph. I do portraits that hang on the wall. So therefore, I am using single shot autofocus. I am using autofocus, but I am choosing it because you've got two auto systems for your focusing system. You've got autofocus and you've got auto point of focus. I choose my point of focus. I choose single point, I choose that point, and I have it on single shot, where it's just one image that's created, and once it focuses, it stops focusing. And then minimum focusing distance. The minimum focusing distance is listed on every single camera. It's usually on the barrel. If you take the barrel and you turn it, it's either right on the bottom or close to the side, closer to the bottom. It's sometimes listed if you look into the lens on that outer ring, but normally it's right here on this bottom side of the lens. And that will tell you what the closest focusing distance is. Just like your eyes have a closest focusing distance, so does your lens. And a lot of lenses, it's a foot. It could be 3 feet. It could be 6 feet. But you need to know ahead of time what your closest focusing distance is, or you're going to become very frustrated when you're trying to focus on something closer because it will never focus. Now, with your own eyes, you know approximately where that is because you can bring your hand out and you can bring it in. And at some point, you still know it's a hand, but it's out of focus. Same thing happens with your lens. Your cameras, or your lens's minimum focusing distance. And if you find that oftentimes you're within your minimum focusing distance, there is your clue to say, I need a macro lens. That's your tell. There's other tells too, but there's an obvious one. All right. I have a homework assignment for you. And this is approximately what that homework assignment is going to look like when you're done. I want you to choose a subject that has some distance behind it and some room for you to back away from your subject as well. So put on your wide angle lens, switch to your highest number focal length, and keep the subject exactly the same size by backing up from your subject. Put on your zoom lens, sorry. That says wide angle. This should say zoom lens. Zoom. Put on your zoom lens. Or your longest focal length lens if it's not a zoom. Whatever your you may do 2 assignments with this. But this one was done, this particular one was done with an 18 millimeter, so 18 to 55, and someone had a 55 to 200. And so that's what these 2 people, this is 2 different people, obviously it's 2 different people in the photograph, but it's 2 different photographers doing this assignment. And so if I were to block off this first image and just show you that one image, and you didn't see the one on the right, in fact, when I'm in a studio, in a classroom situation, I show them one at a time. I don't show them like I'm showing you. But this image, you see a building and maybe some landscaping in front with a boy standing in front of that. But when you use the wide angle, the story totally changes. The boy didn't move. The building didn't move. The story changes based on the tools that you choose. That's what this is meant to illustrate. And that's what I want you to do as a homework assignment. Get in close to do a wide angle lens, to do a wide angle image, or the opposite. You can start with this one, doesn't matter. But you're a good distance away from your subject when you're doing the telephoto. This one right here. You're a good distance when you're doing telephoto. You're really close when you're doing here. But your goal, keep your subject exactly the same size in both images, meaning you must move between the 2 images. You're close with a wide angle. You're far away with the telephoto. But look what it does to change the story. In that bottom image, that truck, that blue truck, is right there. It's in the image. It looks like it's just 1 or 2 houses over. But it is a cul-de-sac and 1, 2, 3 houses away, so the equivalent of 4 houses away. You can't tell that here, though. It looks like this is her house and that's her neighbor. The story changes based on the tools you choose. And that's what I have to present for you today. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Well, as always, you give us a lot of information, and it's always fun to go try these, tips that you've taught us. And go see what we put out. And Lindsay, if you try this out there and you put it on your Instagram, just do the hashtag PTM for Photo Tips Monthly homework, because we'd like to see those. Okay, great. I'm glad that link worked. I think I had done the direct link on my computer before. And we have, there we go. Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, this was a wonderful thing. Is there any other tips that you would give somebody? Is there anything you're looking at buying this season? Like if anything that you're seeing out there that I mean,
I
I'm thinking you've accumulated
I
all
have the tools that I need, and on rare occasion I do rent.
rent is like always the best way to try it out
Yeah,
and really get familiar with it.
good way to try things out and use the tools that. So yeah, trying things out is that's a fantastic way for rental, and for tools that you are going to you're going to use it just once or maybe 2 or 3 times. Just rent it, don't buy it. Now, if it's super cheap, that I guess that changes things. But when it comes to lenses, how often are you saying super cheap?
Yeah.
It's like oil and water. That's not how it works.
And like you said, it's just a matter of what you're going to use it. I think I looked at some Sony cameras and, just one to use it as your live, are you using a Sony right now or Nikon
My
for your,
webcam right now is a Logitech.
okay, I have one of those there too. And then I was looking at Sony's, has one that has like a nice little boom mic that you can attach to it and everything. Um, and again, then you start looking at the lenses.
I do have a Nikon webcam too. Well, it's not a webcam. I use it as a webcam
Yeah.
though.
Hmm.
But it's got a delay whenever I'm on StreamYard, so I just
Yeah.
don't use it on StreamYard.
Yeah. Well, the Logitech looks really good. So we see that, your colors always look nice back there. Your background, which is a real background, is always nicely done back there. Robin did an amazing job with that piece back there.
Yep.
All right. Are there any questions? If anybody has questions, just go ahead and post those in right now. We are going to get ready to wind this down. We got about 5 more minutes, and it's because Jim's going to run out to his event. James, did you have anything you want to say? I did mention the holiday deadlines went out yesterday in our newsletter, and I talked about the replay for Tuesday, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Uh, is there anything else that you want?
No, I think you covered. I was just going to mention about, telling people to go check out the replay. It was about different product. If you came into this today late, our Tuesday, we had our first Tuesday where we had a couple artists and also a representative from Clampett Paper, where we discussed product ideas for the fine art community. Different ways of, talking to the artist, kind of about, merchandising artwork. And we spent more time than I expected on t-shirts, but it seems t-shirts is really kind of one place where it's at. It's a easy way. You're not going to make, huge, the same amount of money you're going to make on a, framed print, but it's a easy way to sell your artwork, especially if you are more graphics oriented versus, just a, traditional artist. Although, traditional artists are finding ways to merchandise their artwork in the same way that graphic designers have been doing. So yeah, but it was a lot of fun talking to the.
Yeah, we actually stayed a couple of hours afterwards, kept talking about stuff. We got one question in here, Jim, that is from Lindsay, and that is, I think it's for her catching birds. When there's several miles distance between the mountains, um, I'm on the background mountain. So I don't know if you. I remember shooting sports way back when, and that was with film. But what about now? Has lens and the way you use lens still pretty much the same?
Yeah, it is. I'm basing that decision on how close the bird is. If I'm able to get relatively close and oh, okay, so that tells me a longer focal length lens is in order. Um, and to what extent? I mean, I don't know specifically, but whatever you're using isn't high enough. It sounds like. Now you can start really getting into some high prices. I mean, I think it's important to talk about at least a little bit on prices when we go from like 200, 300, and these are pretty normal, and these are usually under $2,500, which still is a lot of money. But when you start jumping up into the 500 millimeter lenses, the 1600 millimeter lenses, if you get the brand name, you're going to be in the $5, $10, $20,000 category. And let me give you a little bit of. I'm going to tease just a little bit. Do you know what the most expensive lens that's made for a camera is? How much it costs? So I'm not talking about like the Jim Webb or James Webb Space Telescope or the Hubble Telescope. Those were a billion. I'm not talking about something like that. I'm talking about made for a camera. The most expensive lens that's ever been made for a camera that I am aware of. Maybe this has changed since I read it. It's probably been at least 5 or 10 years since. Well, probably 10 years since I read about this. The camera. Excuse me. It'll fit on any camera. The major camera brands. But the lens itself, I'm going to tease it before I tell you the answer. The packaging alone is over $100,000. That's the packaging for this lens. The lens is $2.1 million. You can get it without the packaging. So it'd be $2 million. But when you're up at $2 million, you may as well invest in the packaging too to keep it safe. Mm-hmm. Besides, I bet you anything, insurance company is not going to cover it at a cost you're willing to spend if you don't buy the packaging. So, $2.1 million is the most expensive lens, and you potentially have seen an image that was created by it, and you probably don't put it in the good category because I don't. But to each his own. Do you remember several years ago when Kate Middleton was photographed sunbathing? Mm-hmm. With a lack of clothing? Mm-hmm. Yeah. A paparazzi photographer with this lens photographed her a mile away. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, those shots will end up paying for itself, I guess. But,
well, yeah, he did. That photographer sold that image for $1 million. So, yeah. He got half of his investment back like that. Yeah.
Well, Jim, again, we thank you so much for spending the time, especially when we got another event to rush off to. So we appreciate the time you take to do this and prepare for these lives. And we got our last one of the year will be December 1st, because first Thursday will come before first Tuesday. And we will be talking about create and add a watermark. A little bit about that?
So I want to define what a watermark is first. It's just your digital signature that's on the surface of the photograph. Now, it could be something as simple as proof all over the whole thing, and some photographers actually do that. I don't like that myself. And so it's just your signature or your logo, and generally just down on the bottom right side of the photograph. And so that's what I'm going to be going over. This can be done in Photoshop. This can be done in Lightroom. We're going to talk about how to do it in Lightroom. If we've got time, we may do it in both. But in fact, we may. Yeah, we'll do it. I'll make sure I can do it in both. Because it is different in each one of them. But in Photoshop, it's making a brush that is your logo or your signature. And so we're going to talk about that. And so for that one, if you're going to be attending it, and I encourage you to, if you don't know how to do this already, I want you to bring just like a piece of white paper, kind of like like this. Well, this one's already been cut for some other purpose, but this is just one of my 5x7, I call them art cards, but it's where I take some of my print notes. Just bring that. You're going to use the white side of it and some pen that writes thick. Not necessarily a Sharpie, especially not the regular Sharpies. They're a little too thick, but those fine Sharpies are perfect for this. So something like that. The fine point Sharpie. That's what I've used before. And there's other pens. The gel pens usually work well with this. But something that's pretty solid. And you're going to photograph it, and you're going to create your own easy-to-use watermark. So you can add that to your photographs. If you're selling your images, you're drop shipping them, and you want your watermark on it, then this will be how to do that. And you may already know how to do that. I may teach it differently, or I may teach it exactly the same way you know before. You've been doing it. This really helps with if you're uploading your images to a website where people can download them real easily. It's got a signature on it, and so people don't generally steal the stuff that's got signatures on it, although they could. But usually it's images that have nothing on it that is more likely to be stolen. And a lot of people have no clue that that's stealing.
Yeah.
They're totally oblivious to that. I don't know about you guys, but it wasn't taught when I was in school. Plagiarism was taught. It's the same exact laws, the copyright law of 1976 here in the U.S. And it was prior to that, it was the Berne Convention of 1890. So this is something that's been around for quite some time. Berne Convention was worldwide; it wasn't just U.S. And each country usually has their own copyright type laws. But here in the U.S., and it has been updated since 1976, but really the only change in 1989 was that you didn't have to put the Circle C mark on it to make sure that it's known that it's copyrighted, because but based on the definition, if it's been created, it's copyrighted. So therefore it doesn't need a Circle C to prove that it's been created, because you're looking at it. So in 1989 they made that change where it doesn't have to have the Circle C, although I do recommend you do it anyway. So mine has my signature and then a Circle C and then the year underneath the signature. So we'll talk about how to do that and why to do that.
Well, we look forward to that. Like I said, again, you kind of just add to a lot of people's toolbox there, and we appreciate it. And somebody
Happy
did
to do
request
it.
if we could show them a picture of that $2 million lens. I said, we'll go ahead and I'll put that on our social and in our newsletter with the replay link of this video. So I'll have Jim send me that, and we'll get that up to you guys. So y'all
The
can see.
brand is Leica, Leica. So just Google most expensive Leica lens, and
Okay.
you'll probably get it. You'll probably see it. I haven't tried doing that. I suppose I could.
Yeah, so
Do
we
that
should be
real
able to
quick.
see that there. Let's see. You gonna try and pull that up right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I'm seeing $60,000 lenses, $400,000 lenses, 132. Here it is. Most expensive lens, the Leica APO, and let's see if I can just have that on my screen.
I don't know
Nope.
what kind
All
of
right.
holiday discount they would do.
Right? All right. So it's the price has gone down. It's 2.06 million.
I don't know.
So maybe that's their Black Friday sale.
Yeah.
All right. So let me bring that up on the screen so you can see it. Present. Not slides. Share screen. Chrome tab.
Like a drum roll.
Right? Okay. You should see it on your screen right now.
Okay. Let's add that to the stream. And that is wow. I'm guessing you can probably shoot the different little, feathers off of birds with that screen, with that lens.
This is a 1600 millimeter lens.
Wow.
And you can see the camera that's connected to it way back there in the back.
Yeah, it's got its
I
own
wonder if there's a
tripod.
side. Is there a side view of? There's a side view of it.
Wow.
So and it's all metal. That handhold is on both sides. Are you seeing the handhold?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's on both sides, so you can carry it, and you can see just a camera that's sitting inside of it. That
Wow.
lens is huge.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Something new every day.
So,
Well,
but it's definitely not. If you happen to cross paths with it, you'd probably create a couple of images with it and then sell it.
yeah. Well, like I said, we'll hit the lottery. We'll try it out. I'm even guessing rental not possible. So we will see you next month, Jim, and hopefully we see you in here at FinerWorks soon.
Absolutely. I always enjoy visiting you guys.
Yeah.
You always make me feel like I'm at the top of the world. I thoroughly enjoy it. So by the way, they sometimes call me, you guys, they sometimes call me Incredible Jim Landers. It's nothing that I've done. They're reflecting what they do and how they make you feel over there at FinerWorks. They make you feel incredible. So being in the presence of Melissa and James is what causes any incredible that I might be showing. It's reflecting off of them. So we
appreciate
we
that.
love FinerWorks and what they do for the entire world. You guys rock.
You too, Jim. Well, we'll see you soon. I know you have to rush out to your event.
I do. I'm looking
Okay.
forward to it. Thank you guys.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.